The millionaire's sun was sinking, 10 feet down, his lips a ghastly purple, his eyes lifelessly closed. The entire family stood frozen, paralyzed by panic, around the pool. And then she jumped. The new housekeeper, Evelyn Moore, barely knew the layout of the house. She'd only started working there 5 days ago. Evelyn didn't even think. Her body simply knew what to do. She dove in, clothes and all, slicing through the water. She descended with surgical precision, reaching the bottom in what felt like seconds. She grabbed the boy, securing him with practiced ease, bringing him to the surface in movements that appeared almost choreographed. At the pool's edge, as everyone still struggled to process the shock, her hands were already performing chest compressions. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths, textbook CPR. The boy coughed up water. His eyes fluttered open, and she collapsed onto his wet body, sobbing uncontrollably, screaming a name that made the world stop turning. "Ethan! Ethan, don't you leave me again!" Richard Sterling, the millionaire father, turned ghostly pale, because none of this made sense. His new housekeeper was cradling his son like her own, crying with the raw emotion of a mother who'd almost lost her child, shaking with a terror that went beyond mere shock. "How did you—" Richard stammered, barely able to speak. "How did you even know how to do that?" Evelyn stared at her hands, hands that had just executed a flawless rescue, hands she didn't recognize. "I don't know." Her voice was a broken whisper. "I never learned that. My body just remembered. 200 years ago, a man drowned, saving a child. Today, their bodies remembered, before their minds could even understand. This is the story of 3 souls who promised to find each other in every lifetime, and how a swimming pool unlocked secrets that time had desperately tried to erase. If you've ever felt like you knew someone you just met, or if you've ever protected a person with an instinct you can't explain, leave a comment right now, because what you're about to discover in the next few minutes will make you rethink everything you know about destiny, and hit that notification bell. This story has a twist at the 35-minute mark that you cannot miss. Let me explain who these people are, because the impossible thing you just witnessed isn't just the rescue itself. It's who rescued whom. Richard Sterling, 38 years old, owner of one of the largest construction firms in the United States, a 15,000 square foot mansion in Beverly Hills, 6 cars in the garage, a staff of 12, just to maintain the house. Widowed 2 years ago after his wife died in a car accident. Since then, an obsessively protective father to his only son, Ethan Sterling, 6 years old, a quiet, timid child, traumatized by his mother's death. He's in therapy 3 times a week, terrified of water, yet strangely drawn to the swimming pool. The psychologists say it's unconscious confrontation with fear. Richard keeps the pool covered almost all the time. And then there was her, Evelyn Moore. 29 years old, housekeeper, lives in a rented room in Echo Park, on the other side of the city. A single mother of a 6-month-old baby, takes 2 buses to get to the Sterling mansion, sleeps 4 hours a night, works 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to send money to her sick mother upstate. The distance between these 2 worlds was the size of Los Angeles. But what they didn't know is that 200 years ago, back in 1820, these same worlds had already collided, only in the reverse direction. It was a Tuesday, October 15th, 2:43 in the afternoon. Evelyn was on the 2nd floor, changing the sheets in the guest room. It was her 5th day on the job. She barely knew the house, still got confused about where things were, still asked permission to enter rooms. Downstairs, by the pool area, Richard had unlocked the automatic cover. Because some engineers were coming to inspect the filtration system, Ethan was playing in the adjacent room, with the housekeeper Brenda watching him. Theoretically, but Brenda answered the phone, went to the kitchen to grab a pen to write down a message, 2 minutes. That's all it took. Ethan saw the open pool through the window, that shimmering blue. There was something about that water that called to him, something he didn't understand. He slipped out the glass door, walked to the edge, leaned over to see his reflection, and fell in. The small body sank quickly. The water was cold. He tried to scream, but only swallowed water. His arms flailed, and then stopped. It was Evelyn, up on the second floor, who heard it. It wasn't a sound. It was something strange, a tightening in her chest, a sudden and terrifying certainty that something was wrong, terribly wrong, catastrophically wrong. She dropped the sheets and ran, didn't even know where she was running, just ran down the stairs, stumbling, across the hall, out the glass door, and saw a small body at the bottom of the pool, motionless, sinking. Evelyn didn't think, didn't hesitate, didn't scream for help. She jumped, 10 feet deep. She descended in a straight line, arms extended, like a professional diver, grabbed the boy from under his armpits, exactly as the rescue manuals teach, propelled herself from the bottom with her legs, bringing Ethan's body against her chest. She surfaced, reached the edge, lifted the boy out with a strength she shouldn't have possessed. And then, at the edge of the pool, still drenched, her fingers were already on his neck, checking for a pulse. Her hand was already on his forehead, opening his airway. Her body was already positioned for the correct angle for CPR. 30 chest compressions, 2 rescue breaths. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. Richard came running, screaming. Brenda arrived right behind him. In a panic, 2 security guards appeared, everyone paralyzed, watching this new housekeeper perform a flawless rescue. Ethan coughed, vomited water, opened his eyes, and Evelyn collapsed on top of him, crying, screaming that name, cradling that boy as if he were her own. After the ambulance arrived, after the paramedics confirmed that Ethan was stable, after everyone calmed down, Richard pulled Evelyn to the side of the room. "Are you a swimmer?" he asked. "Lifeguard? Paramedic?" "No, sir." Evelyn was shaking. I never took any classes in any of that." "Then how did you know how to do that?" She looked at her hands, hands that had just saved a life, hands that moved on their own. "I don't know, sir. I swear I just saw him at the bottom, and my body moved. Like it already knew." Richard was about to ask something else, but then he saw Evelyn's face and froze, because she was staring at the pool with an expression that wasn't shock. It was terror, ancient terror, deep terror. "Are you okay?" he asked. Evelyn swallowed hard. "I've seen this before." "What do you mean?" "That scene, that feeling. A boy drowning, me jumping in." She shook her head, bewildered. "But this is insane. I've never experienced this before. How can I remember it?" Richard didn't reply, because he was also experiencing something strange. When he saw Evelyn holding Ethan, wet, crying, embracing the boy, he had a flash of a memory that wasn't his. A woman crying, holding a child. But it wasn't at a pool. It was at a river with muddy water. And there was a body on the ground beside her. A man, drowned. He blinked, and the image vanished. "Mr. Sterling?" Evelyn was looking at him. "You look pale." "I'm fine," Richard lied. Can you stay with Ethan today until he falls asleep? He seems calm with you." It was true. Ethan, who was shy with everyone, who wouldn't let anyone touch him after his mother died, was clinging to Evelyn's hand, looking at her as if he had known her for 1,000 years. "Of course, sir." Evelyn knelt in front of the boy. "Hi, Ethan. Everything's okay now. You're safe." Ethan didn't let go of her hand. "I know you," he said quietly. Evelyn felt her heart pound. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "I know you. From the dream. You always save me in the dream." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. Evelyn felt the world spin over the next 2 weeks. Strange things started to happen. First, Ethan didn't want Evelyn to leave his side. He would cry when she left at the end of the day. He begged her to stay. Richard, worried about his son's psychological state, offered Evelyn a room in the house, double salary. She accepted. She needed the money, and strangely, she also couldn't bear to leave the boy. Second, Evelyn started having dreams. No, they weren't dreams. They were memories. She saw a river, an old town, colonial houses, stone streets, and a man in a soldier's uniform. A man with Richard's face. She would wake up sweating, crying, screaming a name. Richard, Richard, come back. But the Richard she knew was her boss. She barely talked to him. How could she be dreaming about him? Third, Richard was also having dreams. He saw a woman, long hair, white dress, crying on the bank of a river, holding a wet child, and beside her, a body, himself, drowned. He would wake up breathless, as if he were underwater. Fourth, Ethan started drawing. Drawings that were odd for a 6-year-old. He drew a river, a bridge, soldiers, and 3 people, a woman, a man, and a child. He wrote underneath, in his wobbly handwriting, "My family before." Ethan's psychologist called Richard, concerned. "Mr. Sterling, your son is talking about a past life. This is common in children after trauma, but the details he gives are very specific. He talks about a town upstate in 1820, about a war, about a drowning in the river. I think you should consider..." "Consider what?" Richard was impatient. "Regression therapy, for him to process these images." Richard hung up the phone. This was absurd. Past life, reincarnation. He was a businessman. He didn't believe in these things, but then he looked at his own chest in the mirror and saw the mark. Richard had always had that birthmark, ever since he was born. It was a dark spot on the left side of his chest, right over his lung. Odd shape. The doctor said it was benign dermal melanosis, nothing to worry about. But Richard had never really paid attention to the shape until that morning. He was getting dressed after his shower when he stopped in front of the mirror and really looked at the mark. For the first time in 38 years, he really saw it. It looked like water, like waves, like water running down, or like lungs full of water. He felt a shiver, and then he remembered something. On the day of the accident, when the paramedics were examining Ethan, one of them had pulled up Evelyn's shirt to check if she was injured from falling into the pool. Richard had seen fleetingly that she had a mark on her chest too. On the left side, dark. Could it be? He went downstairs. Evelyn was in the kitchen making Ethan's breakfast. "Evelyn," he called, "can you come here a second?" She came, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, sir?" Richard hesitated. This was going to sound completely crazy. Do you have a birthmark?" Evelyn frowned. "I do, yes. On my chest. Why? Do you mind showing me?" Evelyn blushed. "Sir, it's nothing inappropriate." Richard was talking too fast. "It's just that I have a mark too, and I thought, forget it. It was a stupid idea." "No." Evelyn was looking at him in a strange way. "It wasn't stupid. I've been thinking about strange things too." She unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of her blouse, pushed the fabric aside just enough to show the skin on the left side of her chest. There was the mark, dark, the size of a coin, exactly in the same place as Richard's, exactly in the same shape. Water, waves, drowned lungs. Richard felt his legs weaken. He pulled open his own shirt, showing his mark. Evelyn's eyes widened. "This is..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Impossible," Richard finished. "This is impossible." But it was there. The 2 marks, identical, in the same place, as if they had been burned into the 2 people by the same thing, as if they were scars from something that happened a long time ago, from a drowning. If you have goosebumps now, leave a comment saying, "I believe," because what comes next is going to get even more inexplicable. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that some connections cannot be explained by logic. It was Ethan who put the pieces together. 3 days after the discovery of the marks, he was drawing again in the living room. Evelyn was beside him, folding laundry. Richard was working on his laptop in the same room, but he couldn't concentrate. He kept looking at Evelyn, at Ethan, at the two of them together. Something was wrong. No, it wasn't wrong. It was strange. It was too familiar, as if the three of them had been in that same configuration before, like a family. "Done," Ethan said, holding up the drawing. "I finished." It was a more elaborate drawing than the others. He had drawn a riverbank, and 3 people. A woman in a long dress kneeling, crying, a wet child being held by her, and a man lying on the ground, motionless, with water coming out of his mouth. "Who are these people, Ethan?" Richard asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "It's us," Ethan replied, as if it were obvious. "You, me, and Evelyn. But when did this happen?" "Before," Ethan pointed to the man on the ground. "You died here. You saved me, but you died." And Evelyn was so sad. He paused, his little brow furrowed. "She promised she'd find you again." Richard felt the room spin. Evelyn dropped the clothes she was holding. Her hands were trembling. "Ethan." She knelt in front of him, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do you know this?" "I remember." Ethan spoke with the unsettling simplicity of children. "At night, I dream, and I remember. You were my mommy before, and Daddy was Richard, but not Daddy. Another Richard. He was your friend, and he jumped in the river to save me when I fell." "And what happened after that?" Richard asked, his voice hoarse. "He couldn't get out. The water was too strong. He drowned. You pulled him out of the water." Ethan looked up at Evelyn. "But he was already dead. You cried a lot. You said you'd find him in every life, that you'd protect us. Always." Silence, thick and heavy. Evelyn was crying. She didn't even know why. But Ethan's words had unlocked something inside her, like a door that had been locked for 200 years. And suddenly, she remembered. It wasn't a flash. It was a flood, a river, murky brown water, chaotic and raging, an attack, gunfire. She was running with a child in her arms. A man in a uniform was shouting, "Evelyn, run!" The child fell into the water, the man jumping in after him, the current dragging them both down. She jumped too, managing to grab the child, watching the man sink, pulling him to the shore. Too late. He was already dead. His eyes open, his mouth full of water. She was screaming, promising, "I will find you. In every life, I swear." Evelyn fainted. Let's pause for a second, because you need to understand what just happened. 3 people, a millionaire, a housekeeper, and a child. 3 people who, in the logic of the world, should have no connection besides an employment contract. But they do. 1, an impossible rescue, with CPR techniques that were never learned. 2, identical birthmarks, in the same place, with the same shape. Marks that look like drowning scars. 3, shared dreams about a river, a death, a promise. 4, a child who draws memories of a life he shouldn't know. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe some promises are too strong to be erased by time. Maybe some souls really do find each other again. And maybe, just maybe, that swimming pool wasn't the first drowning that these 3 souls witnessed together. Evelyn woke up on the living room couch. Richard was beside her, holding a glass of water. Ethan was sitting on the floor, drawing silently. "You passed out," Richard said gently. "It's been 10 minutes. Evelyn sat up slowly. Her head was throbbing. But it wasn't physical pain. It was as if someone had opened a file inside her brain, a file that had been locked for centuries. "I remembered," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I saw everything. What did you see? A river, upstate, but it was old, colonial. There were soldiers, gunfire. I was running with a child in my arms, and there was a man. She looked at Richard. It was you, but you were in uniform. A guard, or a soldier. Richard felt the air whoosh out of his lungs. And what happened? The child fell into the river during an attack. You jumped in to save him, but the current, you drowned. I managed to save the child, but you were already dead when I pulled you to shore. A heavy silence filled the room. Ethan stopped drawing and looked at them both. It was 1820, he said, his little voice clear. I was little, 3 years old. My name was Ethan too. Your name was Evelyn. He pointed at Evelyn. And you, he pointed at his father, were Richard too. Richard Sterling, her family's personal guard. Richard ran a hand over his face. This was insane. But how could 3 people have the same hallucination? How could a 6-year-old know historical details from 1820? This doesn't make sense, he said, but his voice was weak. Reincarnation doesn't exist. There's no way. Then how do you explain the marks? Evelyn asked, her eyes searching his. How do you explain me knowing CPR techniques I never learned? How do you explain your son drawing scenes from a time he never studied? Richard had no answer. Evelyn stood up. She went to the window. She looked out at the swimming pool, and she had a thought that made her shiver. If this is true, she said slowly, her voice trembling, if we really lived before, then you died for me. You died saving my son, and I promised to find you again. She turned to look at Richard, and 200 years later, I jumped into a swimming pool to save that same son, because my body remembered the promise before my mind understood. Richard felt something crack inside him, a resistance, a wall of skepticism that he'd built his entire life. Because she was right. There was no other explanation. I need to know if this is real, Richard said, his voice tight. I need to be sure. How do we do that? Evelyn asked. Research? Historical records? If this really happened in 1820, there have to be documents, death certificates, records of military attacks. Richard was already grabbing his phone. I know a historian, a specialist in colonial upstate. If anyone can confirm or deny this, it's him. And if he confirms it, Evelyn was afraid of the answer. Then, we accept the impossible. Doctor Theodore Adams, 62 years old, retired professor from Columbia University, specialist in 19th century American military history, author of 3 books on the Revolutionary War. Richard called him to the mansion the next day. Mr. Sterling, Dr. Adams entered the library with a folder full of papers. You asked me to research specific names in 1820 records. Richard Sterling, Evelyn Moore, Ethan Moore. And did you find anything? Richard asked, his jaw clenched. The historian opened the folder. He pulled out 3 aged documents, photocopies from the National Archives. I did. He placed the first document on the table. Death certificate. Richard Sterling, 26 years old. Profession, municipal guard soldier. Date of death, March 15th, 1820. Cause, drowning in the Hudson River during a confrontation with militia forces. Evelyn, who was standing behind Richard, put her hand to her mouth. Dr. Adams continued. He placed the second document. Witness statement. Evelyn Moore, wife of a merchant, reported that soldier Richard Sterling drowned trying to rescue her 3-year-old son, Ethan, who had fallen into the river during the attack. She managed to rescue the child, but the soldier died at the scene. The world stood still. Richard picked up the document with trembling hands. The words were there, black and white, on 200-year-old paper. Their names, the same story, exactly as they had remembered. This can't be real, Richard whispered, his voice barely audible. There's more. Dr. Adams placed the third document. Isabella Moore's personal diary, kept in the Moore family archive. An entry from March 16th, 1820, the day after his death. He read aloud, Richard is gone. He jumped into the river to save Ethan without hesitation. I managed to bring Ethan back, but Richard, I found him on the bank, lifeless. He died in my arms. I made a promise before his body. I will find you again, in every life to come, and I will protect this boy, always, until the end of all time. Absolute silence filled the library. Evelyn was crying, not from sadness, from recognition, because those words had come from her own mouth 200 years ago. Richard couldn't speak because it was scientifically impossible, but it was documented, proven, real. How is this possible? He finally asked the historian. Dr. Ortega gathered the papers. Mr. Sterling, I'm a historian. I deal in facts, and the facts say that these three people existed in 1820 and that they died exactly as you described. He paused. But if you're asking me how these same three people are alive again now, 200 years later, with the same names, I have no scientific answer for that. But do you believe in reincarnation? Evelyn asked. The historian looked at her, then at Richard, then at Ethan, who had entered the library and was listening to everything. I believe in evidence, he said, and the evidence suggests that something beyond our understanding is happening here. Leave a comment now. Do you believe in reincarnation? Or do you think this has some scientific explanation that we just don't know yet? Because in the next few minutes, they're going to do an experiment that will reveal details that no historical document could have recorded. 3 days after the historical confirmation, Richard had an idea. If you really lived before, he said to Evelyn, if you were this Isabella, you should know more things. Things that aren't in any document. Like what? Details. Where you lived, what the house was like, names of people, specific places in Beverly Hills in 1820. Evelyn hesitated. I don't know if I can remember those things. Try. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the memories come. There was a house, she began, big, colonial, on Rodeo Drive, number 234, 2 stories. Heavy wooden door with a brass knocker shaped like a lion. Richard was writing everything down. Continue. The inner courtyard had a fountain with fish, goldfish, and there was a tree, a jacaranda. My husband, no, Isabella's husband, his name was, she frowned, concentrating, Fernando Moore, a leather and wool merchant. Give me more details. The kitchen was in the back. It had a wood-burning stove and a housekeeper named Brenda. She made empanadas that Ethan loved. And there was a dog, small, brown and white. His name was Captain. She opened her eyes. I don't know if that helps. It might just be imagination. Let's find out. Richard was already calling Dr. Ortega again. 2 hours later, the historian called back. Mr. Sterling, his voice was trembling. I checked Rodeo Drive 234. There was indeed a property registered in the name of Fernando Moore in 1820, a leather and wool merchant, married to Isabella, a son, Ethan. What about the other details? I found an inventory of the property made after Fernando's death in 1823. It lists the contents of the house. There's a description of the front door, cedar wood, brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head. And there's a record of a fountain in the courtyard, described as having ornamental fish. Richard almost dropped the phone. There's no way she could know this, Dr. Ortega continued. These documents have never been digitized. They're in physical archives, locked away. I only managed to access them because I have special authorization. How did she describe details that only exist in papers that no one has read in 100 years? Richard had no answer. Because there was no rational explanation. Evelyn knew because she had been there. She had lived in that house 200 years ago. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept walking around the 15,000 square foot mansion, thinking, processing the impossible. And then he remembered something. The 15,000 square foot mansion where he lived now had been built on an old property. The lawyer had mentioned during the purchase that it had been a colonial estate, torn down and rebuilt in the 1950s. But in the basement, there was an old vault made of stone, built in the colonial era. Richard had never opened it. He didn't even know if it worked. He went down to the basement at 3 in the morning, found the vault behind some boxes. The iron door was rusted, but it wasn't locked. He opened it. Inside, there were wooden boxes, old, covered in dust. Richard opened the first one. Inside, there were yellowed papers, letters, documents, and one thing that made his heart stop: a necklace made of silver with a locket. He opened the locket. Inside, there were 2 tiny portraits, hand-painted, a man in a military uniform and a woman in a white dress. On the back of the locket, an inscription in Old Spanish: "For Richard, who gave his life for us. I will find you in every existence. Isabella." Richard felt the world spin. He ran upstairs, knocked on Evelyn's bedroom door. She opened it, startled. "What happened?" "I found this." Richard showed her the necklace. Evelyn looked and collapsed to the floor, crying. I remember this necklace. I had it made. After he died, I put his portrait in it, and mine, and I wrote the promise." She took the locket with trembling hands. "How is this necklace here, in your house?" Richard took a deep breath. "Because this 15,000 square foot mansion was built on the land of the old Moore property, Rodeo Drive 234. I checked the property documents. This land was yours. It was Isabella's, 200 years ago." Evelyn looked around, at the walls, at the floor. "I lived here," she whispered. "This was my home, and now I've come back, as the housekeeper, to save the same son and find the same man." Richard sat down next to her on the hallway floor. "Evelyn, I don't know what we do with this. We accept it." She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since they met, without the barrier of employer and employee. "We accept that some things have no logical explanation, that some promises are too strong to be broken, not by death, not by time." Richard took her hand and felt, for the first time in 200 years, that he was complete. The next morning, Ethan walked into Richard's room without knocking. "Dad, do you remember now?" Richard was lying down, holding the old necklace. He looked at his son. "Remember what? Remember when you saved me? In the river. I've been seeing images, in dreams, but I don't know if they're real memories or just suggestion." Ethan climbed onto the bed. He sat next to his father. "You jumped in without thinking. The water was so cold. You grabbed me and tried to swim back, but the current was too strong. You pushed me toward the shallow water. I saved myself, but you were swept away." Richard felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Evelyn pulled you out of the water. She tried to wake you up, but you were already gone." Ethan took his father's hand. "She promised she'd find you, and she did. She's always protected me, in all the lives." "How do you remember all of this?" Richard asked. "I don't know. I just do. When I was younger, I thought it was a dream, but now I know it's not." Ethan looked at his necklace. "And I know something else." "What's that?" "That we're a family, a real family, no matter how much time has passed. Evelyn isn't just the housekeeper. She is. She's always been my mother, and you've always been the Richard who loved her." Richard held his breath. "I never said I loved her. In that life, I know." Ethan smiled. "But she knew. And this time, you can tell her." Richard made a decision. If all of this was real, and all the evidence suggested it was, then he wasn't going to waste this second chance. He called Evelyn to the garden that afternoon. "I've been thinking," he began, "about everything we've discovered, about 1820, about the promise." "Me too," Evelyn replied, "and I understand if you want me to leave. This is very strange, too disturbing to process." "No, Richard took her hand. The opposite. I want you to stay, not as a housekeeper, as family. Evelyn's eyes widened. Richard, I know it sounds crazy. I know we barely know each other in this life. But Evelyn, our souls have known each other for centuries, and I wasted an entire life without telling you how I felt. I'm not going to waste this one. What are you saying? That I want to try, slowly, the right way, but I want to get to know you, the Isabella you were, the Evelyn you are, and I want Ethan to have the mother he remembers, that he's always felt was you. Evelyn was crying. But what if we're crazy? What if all of this is just a crazy coincidence? Then we're crazy together. Richard smiled. But I don't think we are. I think this is real, and I think it deserves a chance. Evelyn looked at the 15,000 square foot mansion, at Ethan, who was at the window, waving, and felt, finally, that she was home. There's one thing I need to do first, Richard said, to be absolutely sure, to have no doubt. What's that? Hypnotic regression. The two of us, together. If our memories coincide in details that neither of us could know, then there's no more question. When? Tomorrow. I've already scheduled an appointment with a specialized therapist, Dr. Martina Salazar, 46 years old, a psychotherapist specializing in regression therapy, 20 years of experience. Discreet office in the Beverly Hills neighborhood. Richard and Evelyn arrived together the next morning. Do you understand how this works? Dr. Salazar asked, sitting in front of them. Hypnosis isn't magic. It's not mind control. It's just an altered state of consciousness where deep memories can come to the surface. Memories of this life? Richard asked. Normally, yes. But there are cases, rare cases, where people access memories that don't seem to be from this current incarnation. She paused. Do you believe in reincarnation? I didn't, Evelyn said, until 3 weeks ago. Dr. Salazar nodded. What you're asking me for is a simultaneous regression. Two people at the same time, accessing the same memory. It's extremely rare. I've only witnessed it once in 20 years of my career. Do you think it's possible? Richard asked. If you truly share a deep connection, a traumatic memory that marked both souls, then yes, it's possible. She prepared the room. 2 reclining armchairs, side by side. Low lights, soft music in the background. I'm going to guide you two together, she explained. I'm going to take you to a state of deep relaxation, and then I'm going to ask you to go back to a specific moment, the day of the drowning. If you really lived this together, your minds will synchronize. You will see the same scene, feel the same emotions. What if it doesn't work? Evelyn was nervous. Then we accept that maybe this is just an elaborate coincidence. Dr. Salazar smiled gently. But something tells me that won't be the case. Are you ready? Richard took Evelyn's hand. Ready. Dr. Salazar's voice was soft, hypnotic. Breathe deeply. Inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. Feel your bodies relaxing, your muscles loosening, your minds calming down. Richard felt his eyelids getting heavy. Next to him, Evelyn already had her eyes closed. Now I want you to go back in time, slowly, passing through the years 2024, 2023, 2020, 2010, 2000. Keep going back. 1990, 1980, 1970. The therapist's voice was becoming more distant. Further, beyond this life, beyond this body. Go back to 1820. Upstate New York, the Hudson River. You're there. Feel, see, remember. Richard felt something strange, like he was falling through time. And then he wasn't in the office anymore. Richard opened his eyes, but they weren't his eyes anymore. It was someone else's body. He was wearing a uniform, heavy, a soldier's uniform. The year was 1820. He knew it without needing to ask. He was running. Along the bank of the Hudson River, there were shots, screams, an attack, British forces against American patriots. And then he saw her, a woman running with a child in her arms. Isabella. He knew her. He worked as a personal guard for her family, protecting her and her son. "Isabella, run!" he shouted, but the child was scared, struggling. And suddenly, the child slipped from her arm, fell into the river. Richard didn't think. He jumped. The water was ice cold, murky. The current was strong, very strong. He saw the child sinking, swam to him, managed to grab him, pushed him towards the shallow water, towards the bank, where Isabella could reach him. But the current caught him. He tried to swim, tried to fight, but the uniform was heavy. The boots were full of water. He was sinking, and then he felt it. His lungs filling with water, and the burning, the desperation, the darkness coming. The last thing he saw was Isabella's face, screaming, jumping into the water after him. Evelyn was living the same memory. But from her point of view, she was Isabella, running with Ethan in her arm, terrified, the shots, the chaos, the child falling, Richard jumping. She saw him save Ethan, push the boy to shallow water. She pulled Ethan to the shore, safe, alive. But then she saw Richard being swept away by the current. "No, Richard, come back, come back!" She plunged into the water, swam to him, managed to grab him, and pulled him toward the edge. But he wasn't breathing. She turned him onto his back, pressed on his chest, tried to force the water out, blew into his lips. Nothing. He was dead. His eyes were open. His mouth was full of water. She collapsed onto his body, crying, holding him, and she made a promise. "I will find you, in every life. I swear, Richard, I will find you." Back in her office, Dr. Salazar's eyes were wide with disbelief, because Richard and Evelyn were speaking at the same time. In a deep trance, Richard, his voice different, younger. "The water is cold. I can't breathe. Isabella, take care of him." Evelyn, crying, her eyes still closed. "No, Richard, come back. Don't leave me." The two were in perfect sync, reliving the same memory at the same time, with dialogue that complemented each other. Dr. Salazar was recording everything, her fingers trembling. "Richard is sinking," Richard murmured. "So cold, so dark." "I will save you," Evelyn shouted, still in her trance. "I will get you out of the water." "Too late. It's already done." "No, breathe. Please, breathe." Silence. And then Evelyn, crying deeply, whispered the words that Dr. Salazar would never forget. "I promise, I will find you in all lives. I protect you. I protect him, always, forever. If you're crying now, you're not alone. Leave a heart in the comments, because this story is far from over. Dr. Salazar needed 10 minutes to bring them both back. When Richard opened his eyes, he was crying. Tears streamed down his face. He couldn't speak. Evelyn woke up screaming, a scream of deep pain, of loss, of grief that was 200 years old but felt fresh. "He died," she sobbed. "He died, and I couldn't save him." "Evelyn," Richard stood up from the armchair, kneeled in front of her. "I'm here. I'm alive. This time, I'm alive." She looked at him, really saw him, and collapsed into his arms. The two stayed like that, embraced, crying, processing 200 years of separation and reunion. Dr. Salazar was pale. She had heard everything, recorded everything. "In 20 years, she said, her voice trembling, "I have never seen this. You two experienced the same memory, at the same time, with dialogues that complemented each other, with synchronized emotions." She paused. "I don't know how to explain this scientifically, but you shared something real, something that transcends this life. Do you believe now?" Evelyn asked. "In reincarnation?" Dr. Salazar looked at the recording on her phone. "I believe in you." The following days were intense. Richard and Evelyn had accessed complete memories. They weren't just flashes anymore. They were entire lives. Evelyn remembered everything. What it was like to be Isabella. The arranged marriage to Fernando. The birth of Ethan. The friendship with Richard Sterling, the young and dedicated guard, the day of the attack, his death, the grief, the years afterward, raising Ethan alone after Fernando died of yellow fever, carrying the promise until the day of her own death in 1851. Richard remembered everything too, being a poor soldier, son of immigrants, with no family, working for the Moore family, falling silently in love with Isabella, knowing she was married and that he could never have her, protecting her anyway, dying for her, happy, because he saved her son. "I loved you," Richard said one night, the two sitting in the garden. "In that life, I never told you, but I loved you." "I knew," Evelyn replied, "and I loved you too, but I was married. It was impossible. This time, it isn't." Evelyn looked at him. "This time, we're not the same people. I'm Evelyn, a housekeeper, a single mom. Poor, and you're Richard, a millionaire, a widower, from a completely different world. Do you think that matters?" Richard took her hand. "After everything we've discovered, do you think that money, social class, any of those superficial things matter when our souls promise to find each other through the ages? But society hasn't lived what we've lived. Society doesn't know that I died in your arms in 1820, that you promised to find me, that 200 years later, you jumped into a swimming pool to save my son because your body remembered the promise before your mind understood." He moved closer. "Evelyn, I didn't waste an entire life just to waste this one too. I want you. I want us. I want this family that we were always destined to be." Evelyn felt the tears streaming down her face. "I want it too," she whispered. Richard kissed her, softly, like he should have done 200 years ago. Like he could finally do now. But there was still something missing. 3 nights after the hypnosis session, Evelyn woke up screaming. Richard ran to her room. She was sitting up in bed, sweating, trembling, but her eyes were shining. "I remember," she shouted. "I remember everything." "What? It's not just 1820. She was talking fast. "There are other lives. I see others. Before 1820, after 1820. Richard sat down on the bed. "What are you seeing?" "Italy, 1650. I was a peasant. You were a soldier. You died defending the village. I promised to find you." She took a deep breath. "France, 1204. I don't know the name, but you were there. You died in a battle. I promised again." More breaths. "And before that, long before that, I don't know where, but always the same thing. You die, protecting someone. And I promise to find you, and we find each other, again, and again, and again." Richard felt a chill. "How many lives?" "I don't know. Many, maybe dozens, maybe hundreds." Evelyn looked at him with absolute intensity. "Richard, we're not just from 1820. We're from forever. Our souls are connected through millennia. And Ethan, him too. Sometimes he's my son, sometimes he's a brother, sometimes he's someone else, but he's always there. The 3 of us, always together, always finding each other." Richard didn't know whether to be amazed or terrified. So, the pool was just the last time, and the last one in a cycle of thousands of years. Evelyn cupped his face. "But this time is different. This time, you didn't die. This time, Ethan was saved and you survived. This time, we can be together. Finally." What happens when 3 people discover they are a family through time? They stop pretending. Ethan officially moved rooms. He started sleeping in the room next to Evelyn's because he remembered her as his mother and couldn't pretend she was just the housekeeper anymore. Evelyn stopped wearing a uniform. Richard insisted she wasn't an employee. She was family. The 3 of them started having dinner together every night, like a real family. Brenda, the longtime housekeeper, noticed the change. She pulled Richard aside. "Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, what's going on here?" Richard smiled. "Something impossible, Brenda. Something you wouldn't believe if I told you. Try me." So Richard told her everything. The marks, the dreams, the historical documents, the hypnosis, the promise of 1820. Brenda listened in silence. When he finished, she sighed. "I've worked in this 15,000 square foot mansion for 20 years, she said. "I saw Mrs. Sterling, your wife, die. I saw you become empty. I saw Ethan wither away with sadness. And then Evelyn arrived, and for the first time in 2 years, I saw Ethan smile. I saw you come back to life." She paused. "I don't know if I believe in reincarnation, Mr. Sterling, but I believe in love. And I see love in this house again. Finally." Richard hugged her. "Thank you, Brenda. Just one thing," she said, smiling. "When you two get married, and you will get married, I know it, invite me to the wedding." Richard laughed. "You're first on the list." But there was still one last piece of the puzzle. Dr. Ortega, the historian, called a week later. "Mr. Sterling, I've found something. Something you need to see." "What is it?" "I can't talk about it on the phone. Come to the General Archive. Bring Evelyn. You need to see this with your own eyes." Richard and Evelyn went to the General Archive the next day. Dr. Ortega was waiting for them in a closed room, surrounded by ancient documents, protected by gloves and plastic. "What did you find?" Richard asked. The historian placed a document on the table. Ancient, yellowed, handwritten in ink that was 200 years old. "This," he said, "is the official death record of Richard Sterling, March 15th, 1820. Richard and Evelyn already knew this document. They'd already seen it. But there's more. Dr. Ortega turned the page. "I found something attached, a document that was archived separately but refers to the same event." He placed the second paper on the table. It was a petition, handwritten, dated March 20th, 1820. Richard read aloud. "I, Isabella Moore, widow of Fernando Moore, mother of Ethan Moore, hereby request that the body of Private Richard Sterling be buried in the Moore family cemetery, next to the tomb of my late husband." He continued, "Richard Sterling gave his life to save my son from the waters of the East River during the attack of March 15th. Without his bravery and sacrifice, my son would have died. I have no words to express my eternal gratitude. He had no family of his own, so I ask that he be considered part of ours." Evelyn had tears in her eyes. "And here," Dr. Ortega pointed to the signature at the end, "are 3 names listed as family of the deceased." Richard read, "Isabella Moore, Ethan Moore, and by extension, Richard Sterling." Silence. "Do you understand what this means?" Dr. Ortega asked. "She officially declared him as part of the family 200 years ago. Even though he was just a guard, she considered him family." "Because he was," Evelyn whispered. "He always was." Dr. Ortega picked up a third document. "And there's this." He placed it on the table. "The will of Isabella Moore, written in 1850, a year before her death." Richard read, "I leave to my son Ethan all my possessions and properties, with one condition, that he keep alive the memory of Richard Sterling, the man who saved us, and that he believe, as I believe, that true souls meet more than once. That love transcends death, that promises can cross centuries." Evelyn collapsed into the chair, crying, because there it was, the final proof, not only that they had existed in 1820, but that the promise had been real, documented, preserved through 200 years. Richard picked up all the documents. He looked at Evelyn. "We were already a family," he said. "In 1820, officially documented. Isabella declared you part of the family, even though you were just a guard." He held her hand. "And now, 200 years later, we are again. Only this time I'm not going to die. This time, we stay together." Evelyn looked at the documents, at the words written by her past version, at the promise she had made and kept. "We really went through 200 years, she murmured, "just to find each other again." "Was it worth it?" Richard asked. Evelyn smiled through her tears. Every second. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that true love never dies, that promises can survive time, that some souls were made to meet no matter how many lives it takes. But 2 days later, Evelyn was packing. Richard found her in the bedroom, putting clothes into an old suitcase. "What are you doing?" "I need to go," she said without looking at him. "Go? Where?" "Away. Leave this house, this situation." Richard felt the world spinning. "Why?" Evelyn finally looked at him, and he saw pain in her eyes, ancient pain. "Because I can't take it," she said. "I remember everything now, Richard. All the lives, all the ways you died, all the times I lost you." She wiped away the tears. "I spent centuries looking for you, always finding you, always losing you again. And now that I've finally found you alive, I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you'll die again, that the pattern will repeat, that I'll lose you once more and have to spend another 200 years alone, carrying this pain." Richard approached. He held her face. "Evelyn, look at me." She looked. "I'm not going to die. Not this time. The pattern has already been broken. Ethan almost died but was saved. I didn't jump into the water. You jumped, and everyone survived. For the first time in thousands of years, the story ended differently." "But what if?" "There's no what if," Richard interrupted. "We lived 1,000 lives apart. We're not going to waste this one together because of fear. You promised to find me. You kept it. And now, I promise I won't leave you. Not in this life." Evelyn was trembling, wanting to believe, afraid to believe. "I don't know if I can." And then they heard a scream. "Evelyn, don't go!" Ethan was at the door, tears streaming down his face. He ran and hugged Evelyn around the legs. "Please don't go," he sobbed. "You always leave. In all the lives, you save me, and then you go and I'm alone again, and please this time stay, please." Evelyn collapsed to the floor, hugged Ethan, and cried with him. "All the lives," Ethan repeated. "You save me, and then you leave. This time stay, this time stay." Evelyn looked at the boy, at the man, at the family she had chased across centuries, and finally, she understood. She hadn't spent 200 years looking for Richard just to find him. She had spent 200 years learning not to be afraid to stay. "I'm staying," she whispered. "This time, I'm staying." 3 months later, the 15,000-square-foot mansion felt different. No longer did it resemble the cold, empty house of a widowed man. It felt like a home. Evelyn was no longer the housekeeper. She was the fiancée. Richard had proposed the month before, a simple proposal, in the garden, with Ethan holding the ring. "I already wasted one life not telling you I loved you," Richard had said. "I won't waste this one too. Marry me, officially, forever." Evelyn had said yes. Of course, she had said yes. Ethan was different too, happier, lighter. He had stopped having nightmares, stopped drawing scenes of drowning. Now he drew the family, the 3 of them together, smiling. "Dad," he had said one night, "I'm not afraid of the water anymore." "No, no, because now I know. If I fall in, you'll save me, always, in all the lives." And then the day arrived. Richard, Evelyn, and Ethan were at the edge of the pool. That same pool where it had all begun, where the impossible had revealed itself, where 200 years of separation had finally ended. "Are you sure?" Richard asked Ethan. Yes. The boy was wearing arm floaties, smiling. "I want to learn to swim, with both of you." Evelyn entered the water first, then Richard, then Ethan, holding both of their hands. The water was warm, calm, nothing like the icy river of 1820, nothing like the cold pool on the day of the accident. "Are you ready?" Evelyn asked. Ethan nodded. They started, slowly, teaching Ethan how to float, how to move his arms, how not to be afraid. And as they did this, something magical happened. The 3 souls, that had met and lost each other through 1,000 lifetimes were finally together in the water, without fear, without tragedy, without death, only love, only family, only redemption. "I did it," Ethan shouted, swimming alone for 6 feet. Richard and Evelyn applauded, laughing, crying, embracing, and at that moment, the promise of Isabella Morales, made in 1820 on the bank of a river, was finally fulfilled. She had found Richard, not only in this life, but through all the lives. And this time, no one died. This time, everyone stayed. This time, finally, the happy ending. Richard held Evelyn close while Ethan played in the water. "Do you think we'll find each other again?" she asked. "In the next life?" "Without a doubt," Richard replied. "But this time, we won't need 200 years. Because this time, we learned that some souls don't need to die to find each other again. They just need to choose to stay." Evelyn kissed him softly, as she had done 1,000 times before, as she would do 1,000 times more. "Then we stay. We stay." And the three of them stayed. In the pool, in the house, in life, a family rebuilt through time, a promise fulfilled across centuries, a love that not even death could erase. Some people will say this story is impossible, that reincarnation doesn't exist, that it was just an elaborate coincidence, and maybe it is, but maybe, just maybe, some connections are too strong to be explained by science. Some promises are too deep to be erased by time. Some souls are too destined to be lost forever. If you believe this, leave a comment saying, "Some souls never get lost." If you've ever felt like you know someone from another life, share this video. And if you're looking for someone across time, keep looking. Because if Richard and Evelyn found each other after 200 years, you'll find who you're looking for too. Thank you for watching. If you stayed until here, you're part of this journey with us. Ring the bell, leave a like, comment your story, and believe some promises cross lives. See you in the next video, where another soul will discover that the impossible is just what hasn't been proven yet. Until then, remember, you're never alone. Some people are looking for you through time. Just let them find you.